You're listening to Rebel Spirituality with me, Sam Goldfinch. Here's the truth. Wisdom doesn't follow rules. So each week we're going to explore what it means to wake up your way so you can live a more peaceful, creative and inspired life no matter your circumstances. It's time to blaze your unique path to truth. Hey friends, so this week what a treat. I've got my best pal, my business partner and my soul brother on the show. And that's all one person, all combined into the one and only Scott Pinyard. Not Pinyard. I've been saying his name wrong for however many years. So I apologise, Scott. Add to anybody who is in the wider Pinyard clan if I've been saying your name incorrectly all this time. But we have a really lovely discussion about kind of Scott's journey over the course of the last few years with the principles and what he's come to see more deeply. He has a very scientific background and still does, but sees things differently now, which is always a fun discussion. So I'm excited about that. And just a quick reminder from me that I will be speaking at the Dare to Be You conference in the UK from the 4th to the 6th of March. And I would love to have you in the room. I'd love to see you there. So I'm going to put the details in the show notes. I'll be doing a keynote. I'll be speaking on stage a number of times with a combination of amazing speakers on some awesome topics. And yeah, we're going to be talking about wisdom, not following rules. We're going to be talking about all sorts of good stuff. So I'd love to see you there. And obviously to have your smiling face looking back at me would just be a wonderful thing. What a wonderful addition to an already amazing few days. So without further ado, I will hand you over to me and Scott. See you there. Right. Glad to hear that you put your face on, man. We've both got hats on as well. It's like we're matching.
Okay. Yeah, it's not every day I get to come on this podcast. So I took my time when I put my hat on over my dirty hair this morning. So I really want to make sure it looked right.
Man, I wish I had a hat on for a different reason. But I got to be honest, I just couldn't be asked to wash my hair today.
Same. Totally same. Totally same.
Although, as you say, it isn't so often that you've been on here, but you have been on here before. I think it's got to be, It's probably nearly 2 years ago you were on this, on the Rebel podcast anyway. I think, obviously we have loads of conversations on our other podcast, which of course we'll, I'm sure, mention if we'll point people towards, if nothing else. But it's been a couple of years, I think, right?
Been a while. Yeah. I was thinking about that on the drive in this morning, and I moved my office a lot. So I pinned it to where my office was at the time. And based on that archaeological information, I think it was at least 2 years.
There you go. And I mean, you literally moved both the location of your office and also the shit within your office. So
I can't sit still. Yeah.
It's like feng shui's gone wrong or something. I don't really know.
It's not gone wrong. It's gone right. It's like I've been here now for 6 months. See, that means I got to move now that we pointed this out as soon as I'm off this call. No, I like switching things up. I like the way it feels. So
I get it, man. I get it. Right. So what we really wanted to talk about today. So you were here a couple of years ago, and then the story of Sam and Scott. I didn't know I was going to say that. That's funny. The story of Sam and Scott began many years before. I don't know how many years now. We could probably figure it out. Were you my boss once? Did it count? I guess kind of.
I don't know. I never looked at it that way. Let's go with that. I like the way that feels. I never thought of it.
Who's the boss now, motherfucker? Still, but it's just shared bossship now. No, you were. Many people will know that we first met working, basically for This Naked Mind, helping people stop drinking or reduce drinking. And at the time you were like head coach over there. And I know that the way that we both saw the world was different. I was kind of on this journey I was already kind of covert. Well, was it covert? I was kind of just wasn't so overt about the fact that I was doing spiritual shit. I know, right? It wasn't that covert. I was just a massive hippie even then. I've always been a massive hippie. But I know for you, like, you're an amazing coach with a certain paradigm and a way of looking at things. And I know a huge amount of that has changed, both through our relationship as friends, the professional relationship of coaching and running groups together. We have current projects together. We ran something called the Forever Conversation, which I'm sure we can talk a bit about what was behind that, because I think it underpins most of what me and you talk about, is this fascination with just how we work, how life works. And I know a lot of stuff's changed for you, man. I know that you see things a bit differently now, to say the least. And I wanted to explore it. It just made sense that we get you on and I don't know, just riff on that and just see what's changed. How do you see things differently compared to a few years ago? How has it impacted you? How has it impacted the people that you've worked with? And as well that a lot of the people listening to this, they know about the principles, understanding the inside out understanding. They will have many of them, and some people not so much. It'll be kind of a bit of a
Yeah.
mix, so we can kind of see where we go with it. But
Yeah.
where do you want to start, man?
I don't know. I was thinking you brought up the Forever Conversation, which is a project you and I did a couple of years ago. And I haven't gone back and watched in a while, and I kind of want to because I feel like that ongoing conversation chronicled a very interesting turning point for me.
Cool.
Going back, I remember you and I having conversations about materialism.
Mm.
I remember you and I having conversations about the word spiritual and me being like, "Bleh," like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And it was just such an interesting time because one of the things that is huge for me and always has been, and we've already touched on it with changing my office. I love the idea of continuing to change and evolve the way I see things, the way to what people would call grow, right? And so I've done this on so many different areas of my life. I've done this, personally in the way that I see things and the way that I see the world works. I've done it politically. I've just done a lot of different growth. And to me, the idea of like figuring it out, I'm doing quotation fingers for people listening, like that never happens, right? There's deepening of knowledge, there's a new understanding, and then we go on to continue to compile that.
Mm.
And this journey, around whatever you want to call it, spiritual stuff is a huge one for me. Because I was, I guess 10 years ago now, I was way into new atheism, right? So the
You're a
folks
card-carrying atheist.
I have a fucking
You had
tattoo.
all the badges, brother.
That is an atheist tattoo.
Oh
Like,
shit!
man.
That's a chronicle. Oh fuck! You're gonna have to I don't know, try and scrape. Well, I don't know. We can talk about that.
No,
But
well, that's the thing, right? I love it because to me, it's a totally other conversation. I'll come back on. We can talk about tattoos, but I love tattoos. For me, are like this was a phase in my life, so
Yeah.
I love it, and it's not about removing it. But so anyway, I was like staunchly in that category in this like very empirical, I guess you would call it rational world, right? And so the folks listening might know the four horsemen, right? Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, and of course, how did I just forget his name? My favorite one too. Christopher Hitchens.
I was going to say, yeah. Sorry, I had it if you didn't, so that's good. Yeah.
But like, I loved them. And there was something really refreshing to me about the lack of mushiness in how they were talking about things. I had grown up with like sort of this vague Christian-y, being raised. Like I went to Sunday school a little bit when I was a kid. We went to Lutheran church for a while. And then there was a period of time we'd go to, I don't even know what it was, like a community, just sort of your non-denominational Christian church, like a couple of times a year. And then that kind of faded away. And so I had this like that vague sort of worldview, and I'd done my own searching and stuff, but I just got to a point in my life where those guys really started making sense. So it was like 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. I was really like into it. But then, like life moved on and I started seeing things differently. And actually, one of the things that sort of kicked off this change for me was to begin coaching. So I quit drinking, I began coaching, and then I got hired at This Naked Mind as the head coach there. And I stayed there for about 4 years. And over that time, coaching in various capacities, it put me in this position where I was looking at other people and looking at their experience. And at first, I was really trying to do the thought thing. Like, let's turn that thought around, right? Let's flip that around. Like, that's negative. Like, there's positive, blah, blah, blah. Like, and I very quickly started to see for them and for myself, like, that was insufficient, right? That like, while that can work in the moment, and it certainly is a valid thing, it also like, it felt cheap. It felt like this is like a party trick, which again, that doesn't make it a bad thing. It just doesn't lead to the sort of change that I was hoping people would make. And then I went deeper, right, to this idea of story or belief, like the way we see the world. And I stayed there for years, right? And started working and doing work on that level, which was really great. But as time went on, I started to really question, like, I think there's something deeper here. And that's when I started stepping into more of a spiritual realm. I just gave you a whole spiel.
No,
there.
I love it. It's like, and then I got hold of you and was like, hey, check this out. It's funny because I remember
this book.
ages ago, this is going to be even much before the conversation you and I had here on this podcast a couple of years ago. We had you on the President and Sober podcast, and it was called Adventures in Consciousness. And
Yes.
funnily enough, even then, I don't know if you or I or Ellie, I don't know if any of us knew the degree to what was going to happen on that call. So I was kind of already very much coaching from, spiritual understanding, all this kind of stuff, the principles, and we ended up having this conversation. We went really, really deep, and we were exploring kind of the idea of story and all of this kind of stuff. And but I could sense that, well, there was something kind of, it was a really cool conversation. It probably was the first time, one of the times that I thought to myself, oh, like me and Scott need to talk about way more than just what we talk
Yeah.
about. So that's an interesting signpost because I kind of remember that. And then, yeah, I remember going from there. It's funny you mentioned, there's just a few things to come back to later. You mentioned the Four Horsemen, and we can talk about Sam Harris and but potentially, well, his partner Annika and the awesome work that she's
Yes.
done, and kind of how that's potentially impacting how people see it, and how maybe even Sam sees it. And I can't speak for Sam, of course, but it'd be interesting and to maybe come full circle and reflect on that, because it's an interesting one. But where does it make sense to go to from here, man? I know that I can't actually remember. I must have got excited at some point and said, have you checked this out? Have you checked that out? What did I give you? Did I give you Jamie's book, Clarity?
I think I can't remember if it was Clarity first or if it was the Enlightened Gardener first.
Sid recordings or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was that like? So you're at this point where you kind of moved from being like a card carrying, full on, atheist through to someone who's kind of playing around with people's internal realities, more like sort of like CBT, NLP,
Yes.
kind of stuff. And I really resonate with that kind of feeling that, it's not that stuff doesn't help. It can help, but I think there's a limit to it, as you say. And sometimes it does feel like a cheap trick. And I wonder if we're just kind of pumping people up for them to deflate again at some point, And, so all of that. And then you land reading either Clarity by Jamie Smart or direct from Mr. Sidney Banks, you read The Enlightened Gardener. What strikes you? What happens in that moment? Because I'm fascinated by that, like what it was that you saw.
Well, backing up just a little bit, like I started to, so in doing this work, I started to see a value in spirituality to people that I wasn't seeing that side of it before, or that I was, and then I was dismissing it.
In what sense? How do you mean?
Like how, and this was a lot from like a Christian perspective, which, I'd done that, and it was, I don't know, I think you said it not long ago, like, I'm not, not super into the J-man, like, but like, that was like, but I was trying, right? And I started exploring and I started reading some stuff about it. And what I would see was like, I was seeing this level of, I don't know, like contentment, or there was a level of like, somehow faith was bringing people peace in a way that didn't seem possible for me. And I thought it was an understanding thing. Like I thought like I was missing something. And so I started diving in, right? Which is like classic, right? Using a bunch of head knowledge to try to figure this thing out. And like I had tried and I was, kind of waffling and looking at that. But then when I eventually did land, and again, I can't remember what book it was, but when I eventually did land at, looking at the principles, it's funny because at first it makes sense, like to an extent on an intellectual level. So I think it might have been The Enlightened Gardener, because I remember thinking to myself, like, all right, I understand about half of this, and I don't have any fucking idea what the other half of this is saying. But the first half I really like, but there was a feeling to it. I'm like, there's something here that I am not seeing. And what I didn't understand at the time was that I was trying to intellectually connect with it, even though Sid says not to. Like I think in like every Sid video, I'm pretty sure at some point he says, "Don't listen to my words."
It's kind of like a bumper sticker for Sid, yeah.
Which, I'm sitting there like taking notes, like, don't listen to words. Like it's just like I'm missing the boat. But like there was something to it, right? And so I kind of opened up to start exploring it more. And this coincided with the time when I left This Naked Mind, and I was doing a lot of work with co-parenting, which I still do from time to time. I've kind of my practice has evolved over time. But then I really started, like, from a fresh perspective, asking myself, like, how do people change? Like, I would see people go through this process of quitting drinking. Like, I went through it, and I've talked to lots of people about it. And I was really starting to wonder, like, what is it really? Like, because, like I said, like, I knew a lot of that thought work wasn't the thing. Like, that felt like there was something else. And so that started me on this journey of starting to understand a little bit more about what it means to, like, separate from your thoughts.
Mm.
And I think that Sid's work and Principles work in general, and I started reading a bunch of different books in it, really started to open me up to that idea. And so I moved into this realm out of, like, the thinky understanding into a more, I don't know, embodied understanding, or a more just knowing that something was true because of how it felt, as opposed to just, like, intellectually or empirically seeing it. And that started to shift things. So, like, it was this a bit of an eye-opening or confusing time for me, because it felt like I had been viewing the world one way for so long, and now this other thing is popping up and I don't really understand it, but it, like, feels right. And that is, I don't know if anyone out there listens to the New Atheist, like, that is like 180 degrees,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
off of what
Yeah.
they talk about.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting. And I think it was a process. You asked me, like, what it was like. It was a process of recognizing how I was feeling and letting myself grow in that direction, while at the same time kind of shedding some of the stuff that I'd picked up with the New Atheists. And I'm a big fan of, there's a theory of evolution called spiral dynamics that I'm not going to get into, but there's one piece of it that I love, which is that, like, humans go through different stages, and one of the things we do when we go from one stage to the next is transcend and include.
Mm.
And I love this idea. And that's, like, what I started doing, what I started allowing to do. And then things just started naturally shifting.
I'm just going to interrupt for a minute, because I was going to make a few kind of assertions, and then you can kind of tell me if it aligns with how it looks for you. Like, the hit I got, man, was like a few things happening at the same time. One was a realization that the thought form spirituality and what that had meant in your head. Like, we had discussions around what the average person in the US or Canada, how they'd see that word, or in Europe, like, how they'd see that word. And we kind of were unpicking, like, it doesn't really mean anything. And then really getting back into the root of just this spiritual, formless consciousness, and kind of, talking about that. And it's suddenly like all of those forms falling away alongside you. I think the thing that maybe you have that a lot of people haven't when they first come to something like the three principles is you're an engineer, man. So you get first principles. You know that what that's really like. A lot of people in this world haven't fully grasped what we're talking about by first principles, pre-existing facts. This, like, and so that for you, I think, was powerful, because you weren't seeing it as ideas. You were really questioning, well, is this actually how it works? And so a lot of the language might feel kind of a little bit kind of, people think, oh, is it not just like new agey and positive thinking? But the hit I got was that you were like, wow, maybe this is actually included. Maybe I don't have to stop looking at this with a scientific perspective or any of that kind of stuff. It's just a different way of relating to it. So my guess was that, but that's the hit I got, but I don't know how it was for you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. That language of principles really intrigued me, because, and just so we can kind of define the term, like, when Sid talks about principles, these are the bedrock, like, sort of foundational way it works. Yeah. Right. And so you have this in science, right? So everyone has heard about thermodynamics and, like, the first and the second and the third. There's also a zeroth law of thermodynamics, believe it or not, because they discovered it later, but they're like, fuck, that has to go first. So they made it zero. But anyway, so science has this, right? And they're building blocks, right? Like, these are the foundational things, and then everything is built off of this. And when I started to look at the principles that way, something clicked, in a way. And that was very attractive. Now, simultaneously, interestingly, because that, like, kind of connected me to, like, a scientific way of thinking, there was also, and I cannot remember, I was reading and consuming so much stuff at the time, so I can't remember where I heard this, but there was also this really great conversation about intellectual understanding versus knowing,
Yeah.
and how humans have evolved to have both of those things. And I've had that experience in my life. I've never quite knew how to square that with the, like, you know, fanatically empirical like worldview that I used to have, but like I'd had it before. But I remember hearing someone talk about this idea of like we're so rewarded for our intellect. And that was the case for me, right? I was an engineer. I was, I like people would say things like, "Oh, you're so smart." Not to me, but like in general, like people say like, "Oh, wow, you're achieving, you're doing a lot." And it's almost like we worked out that one arm a lot and give a huge muscle, but this other way of experiencing the world, we didn't exercise at all. And I started to get curious about that. So it was funny because you're right. Like the principled idea of it, the idea of these three principles being the sort of the bedrock was very attractive. But then the method of consuming or understanding those was different in that it was allowing myself to use that other sense of knowing.
Yeah, it strikes me that, and they've known this in the East for thousands of years. And when it comes to understanding how we work, exploring consciousness, like the fact that we know, the one thing that we can prove without any
Yeah.
doubt, the fact that we're aware is effectively only provable from within a conscious system. Like
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
it's fascinating to that. Like, so subjective experience is kind of the bottom of the hierarchy of evidence in scientific method, and the scientific method's amazing, and I love it, and I think it's very powerful. But scientism, and we've spoke about this, the idea that the scientific method is going to have the answers to absolutely everything. I mean, who knows? Like maybe there are things that are uncoverable, discoverable through self-inquiry. So, we've spoken about non-duality throughout the years and the kind of inquiries that are in those traditions as well. They, the fact that you can't kind of prove it, quote unquote, in a traditional scientific method, does that mean that it's not valuable? Like, is it, I think to me, the idea that I think we've maybe taken an innocent misstep. And
Yeah.
I know that we've traded a huge amount of kind of books and things that we've listened to over the course of the last few years and spoken about this at length together as well.
Mhm.
That I think that's, and it strikes me as really interesting. You mentioned the Four Horsemen and Sam Harris. He's got an incredible app called Waking Up, which Sam's,
Huge
I
thing.
think,
Yeah.
probably would still say that he's a materialist. I don't know how we would say it now, but his partner's recently been. She studies consciousness, and she's put together some fantastic. If anyone wants to have their mind blown, I mean, I'd certainly recommend checking out. Is it called Lights On?
I think it's called Lights On. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an audio documentary, really, more than a book. Well worth a listen. She goes around and interviews and talks to some of my heroes. Some fan Donald Hoffman and people that are doing incredible work into
Yeah.
understanding consciousness, and you get a real feeling from it. You get this. To me, the feeling I get when I read David Bohm or listen to Annika interview these people or explore quantum physics is the same feeling I get when I explore the
Mhm.
principles. And to me, that's a signal that we're looking at the same thing, but from a different
Yeah.
lens and different ways of discussing it and learning to kind of, for me personally, when I was in my 20s, and I've said this to you before, but I think you'll probably get this more than a lot of people. I was in such a battle cognitively because for me, it was like I felt like I couldn't rest unless I proved that the mystery of consciousness, which is it local or non-local? Talk about the hard problem, all this stuff. Like, well, all these
Yeah.
brains haven't solved it. Like, there I was trying to figure it out, but I felt like
Yeah.
if I couldn't figure that out, then I was doomed to be spinning in this kind of like, it was just going to be lost. And then at
Mm.
some point I was like, what happens if you live your life or if you experiment and live your life from the idea that the feeling that you're living in is giving you a signal as to when you're moving closer to truth, and it's letting you know when you're moving more into your head and more into your intellect. And
Yeah.
I realized, oh, there's the answer. Because when I explore all of this stuff and I follow the fascination and I get touched by the feeling, as Sid used to say, or the recognition of self, life's really magical and the conversation feels so different. And when I get really philosophical and get caught up in my head and really intellectual, it feels so different again. And I was just like, I'm going to experiment with that. And I got to say, like, since that moment, the last decade of my life has been unbelievable. Like, that was a huge turning point for me. So I have my own way that I saw the exact same thing, maybe in a slightly different way. But I get it, man. Like, I get it.
Yeah. Well, I love you bring up Annika, this whole idea of like change and like evolving how we look at things. I think that's a fantastic example because she wrote a book, and I think it was just called
I think
Consciousness.
it's called Consciousness. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And it was really interesting because if you listen to, and this is one of the reasons, I think she was on Sam Harris's podcast talking about this. I am always a sucker for someone saying, I was like really sure it was this. And then I thought, oh my God, what if it's not? And I started looking at that because that's been the story of my life on like so many different things.
Yeah.
And so that's what she started talking about. And she doesn't go, she doesn't go full like woo with consciousness stuff, right? She's still very grounded in research and empiricism. But it was fascinating for me that she started talking about panpsychism as a possibility.
Yeah.
Right. And again, just to define the term, panpsychism is this idea that there is consciousness is a fundamental force in the universe, like gravity or the strong force or the weak force. And that different objects sort of tune into it in different ways. So like as humans, we're much more conscious than dogs, but we're both utilizing this fundamental force of the universe, but that it's omnipresent. And it's funny because and this is actually something I've been meaning to do more research on, that like, I know this idea was around a long time ago and then it kind of got like poo-pooed and it was like sort of considered unfashionable, but some scientists are coming around to it and rethinking it based on new information. And so it was so fantastic for me to listen to Lights On and to see someone going through that experience of questioning at a fundamental level, and then to see the sort of impact that has. Because for me, I was in the same boat, well, a similar boat with consciousness and like fully rational materialistic. I'm like, we need to understand this. And so like, it's always been fascinating to me and trying to understand it and like reading books and everything. And it's funny because like a lot of these books you read, it's like we kind of have some of the answer, but then we hit a dead end. That is like, I just shortcut like every scientific book on consciousness there, right? Like that's not necessarily super fair, but like, it was like, we don't really understand it was like the thing, right? We're getting a better understanding, but it always seems to, and it struck me that maybe what this is a different line of inquiry was needed. And that's what I saw in Lights On.
Yeah.
And it's a fun thing to explore. And I think, Saint, you mentioned the Waking Up app. Like they do a great job of exploring consciousness on that app. I mean, there's so many different meditations and experiences and classes and stuff. And a lot of it from sort of Eastern philosophy, but a lot of it also just being experimental, more of the direct path. And I don't know, you just kind of put all of that together. And at least for me, it got me into this questioning state, which has allowed me to like continue to grow.
It's fascinating how things are changing. And whether it's, we've spoken about Rupert Spira and his conversations with Bernardo Kastrup, serious physicists, like not your, proper scientists here, not not people that have taken a degree in woo-woo from woo-wooville and then, started making claims, like serious theoretical physicists and it's fascinating that I think something is happening where people are really starting to have these conversations in public in a way where they never used to be able to. Used to find academics would, towards the end of their career, they might kind of say, okay, like this is how I see it. And, Einstein, even some of the most famous scientists, if you listen to what they're really saying, there's a feeling to what they're saying, which is, it's spiritual, man. And in the truest sense of the word, I wrote a piece yesterday basically saying that everything and nothing is spiritual. I was having a conversation with someone on a call the other day. And the thing I've said for years is everything's spiritual. Like this list of shit we have that is and isn't. Like, no, what we're saying is everything is informed by this one foundational truth, consciousness, this intelligence, this formless, the words don't do it justice, but this formless intelligence. And I was chatting to a lady in one of my groups, and she was like, but what about, real world stuff? And what about when it's life or death and all this kind of stuff? And I was saying, well, to me, it looks like the principles are working the same everywhere. They're working, they're neutral. They don't have an opinion, right? They're facts, they're foundational facts. They don't have an opinion. And I said, do you know another way of saying that it's all spiritual? None of it's spiritual. Like it's just the same thing. Like it just is as it is. And I saw a real, got it. Because I think we're so indoctrinated into thinking that the idea that we have of spirituality in our head, which interestingly, we've used the power of thought to create that uniquely, right? Well, what you and I are talking about isn't what any of the 8 point however many billion people have conceptualized as to what spiritual means or spirituality. We're talking about something that lies before creation, before time, space, and matter. So it's interesting that when you read Buddhist texts or when you listen to Sid Banks, and he says things like, so when they first said to Sid, what is reality, Sid? So the story goes, he said, and he was apparently very surprised when these words came out his mouth. He said, reality is a divine dream suspended between the bounds of time, space, and matter, or something, words to that degree. And like, what? But if you actually go and listen to these physicists, if you go and listen to the explorations into time, space, and matter and how it's looking more and more likely that they're emergent phenomenon, they're not foundational, they are emergent, then what it is that lies before and beyond that, Sid was saying that's what we're talking about. Like this isn't some cognitive understanding. And a lot of people hear it, and it can initially be helpful to hear, I'm living in the feeling of my thinking. But no. You're living in the feeling of a formless, invisible, spiritual truth or principle or power that's animating you and bringing your experience to life in every moment. And that's your true identity. That's the truth of who you are. Now, that's what makes a difference to people. And there's a feeling to that. I feel it now a bit like, it's funny, the last 2 or 3 minutes of this conversation, I feel it really strongly here now. It's like, the more I've gone, yeah, wow, what if that's really a signal letting me know that I'm home to what's true? Yeah. It's been such a game changer. And how much has our stuff changed since we've looked in this direction together, man? Like you think about the groups.
Oh my gosh.
It's mad, huh?
It is. It is. There's so much there I want to comment on. Let's go physicsy for a minute. The idea that time, space, and matter is an emergent phenomenon absolutely broke my brain at first. Like because again, that's the science brain, right? So when I think of that and I hear something like emergent phenomenon, like that's what I think of, right? Like I think of it in scientific terms. And so this idea that time, space, and matter may not be foundational, they may not be fundamental. And I think some of this was in the Lights On book as well. It's this feeling of the ground moving beneath your feet. I guess quite literally, right? Time, space, and matter, like sort of starting to dissolve.
Yeah.
And it was a moment where when I started to understand that and I started to see it differently, it was a moment where I was like, I think I have been going in the right direction, right? Because it's like, oh, that quote that, a divine dream suspended between time, space, and matter, like he was actually onto something.
You bet. And this guy was a 9th grade educated welder.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But then you start to feel it and it really changes things.
Yeah.
And so this has really changed. I mean, you're talking about like how much has changed in how we see things. And it's insane. I don't have access anymore to videos of me coaching, say 6 years ago, 8 years ago. Gosh, it's been a long time I've been coaching, but I'm very curious to go back. I would love to be able, and love slash hate to be able to go back and like look at some of those calls because I know what I was saying at the time felt like the right thing. But man, my understanding has completely changed. And so like even if someone comes to me with a problem now, the way that I might talk about it is completely different. Whereas before it might have been very tactic heavy and very thought work. Now I very quickly want to get to, the thing behind the thing. I want to get underneath the problem to a different understanding. I want to talk about the experience of the problem versus the problem because I found that opens up a different conversation.
Yeah, you bet. Like there's many times where Sid says, there's a couple of recordings where he actually says, I don't need to talk about your problems. Let's not talk about your problems. Let's talk about spiritual facts and your problems will fall away. Now, the thing about this particular understanding one of the reasons I'm so passionate about sharing it, even, and I love doing non-dual inquiry and I love really experiencing it, like offering different ways of looking to people. But there's something about the 100%, this metaphor points towards this 100% relationship between thought, the power of thought and feeling. And so that means that you're not separate in any way from your experience. Like you are, the world is being created within you in every single moment. There is no world out there with power over how you think and feel. It's being created from within. So if even someone's quote unquote problem is being created from within their own reality through the power of thought. So the first thing that I want to explore with anybody isn't, because people will quite often come and say to me, I've got this problem and here's what I'd like. Now, if I go, okay, like it's a traditional way of coaching, go, okay, let's come up with a 5-step action plan and how to tackle the issue, right? But if that person has lost sight of the connection between the power of thought, their thoughts, and their reality, well, that's very worth knowing. Because a lot of the time, well, for as long as somebody is believing that their experience is being created by this thing out there and they don't see how it's actually working, they'll be on a wild goose chase. The moment they have an insight into that, I don't know what they'll do. I have no opinion as to that. How could I possibly know? But I want to be really careful not to, dive in, go straight into the deep end when, they've got a bunch of examples coming up to me. Maybe we can potentially share a few if they come up, but that looks central to this to me. Like it's just it's a totally different way of approaching transformational conversations and change. And, really like, what is it that leads to true lasting change? Like, where does insight come from? Where, insight is coming from that same space, from before time, space, and matter. That's the stuff that's making the difference, right? So, yeah. Sorry, Gunnar, I've been waffling. I feel like you might.
No, I love that. I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about, like when I'm in a coaching conversation, like one of the things I like to do is kind of feel it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. Because I have absolutely, and especially when I was first seeing this stuff, I've absolutely just fucking thrown it all out there, and it's, well, you see, and then blah, and I just explain all of this stuff that like, if someone had done that to me, I mean, my clients are so gracious. If someone had done that to me, I would have been like, what? Like, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And so this idea of like feeling out where someone's at, because I don't know, I'm not sure. I think we view this the same way, but like, I've always kind of seen different levels of communication and like helping someone at the level that they see things. So like there are times when I still will help people using thought work. And I do that when that feels like the space where the person's at the moment, right? Where like if I were to say, well, I don't know, if if someone says like I'm really fighting with my partner right now, and I give them some long non-dual answer that ends with, well, there is no such thing as you and your partner. Like for some people, the answer to that is like, fuck you.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It doesn't always go down too well. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, It's always a fun journey for me in these conversations to be like, what feels right? And but the thing that's interesting to me about this process, and I'm just realizing this now, is like I'm using the feeling to decide what to say next, right? Like if I'm using the feeling of the conversation to decide, like, all right, let's hang out here, or you know what, let's try to push it a little bit and see what happens. And it's led to it's led to some big transformations. Like just a few weeks ago, I'm kind of balancing out my one-on-one work with like our present and sober stuff and figuring out schedule and all of that. And like as present and sober grows, I really want to like make time and like, do it. So I've been sort of rebalancing my one-on-one coaching load. And I had this experience, it's probably 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I don't know. Time's weird. I had three clients end with me in the same week because they came to the end of their just the sessions that we had, and all three of them were like, I feel completely different. Two of them were alcohol people who weren't drinking. One of them was not alcohol, it was just sort of like personal coaching. And all three of them were like, I see things completely differently now. And it was such a rewarding thing. And so I thought back over like, all right, how did that happen? Right. Because in kind of slipping into engineer mode a little bit, right? I want to reverse engineer this so like I can figure. And what I realized with all three of them, it wasn't necessarily anything special in the conversation. It was just presence.
Yeah, man.
And it
Oh,
was
bro.
just that willingness to explore. And that changed things.
Like there are no doubt skills. I've invested a huge amount of money and time over the years learning
Hmm.
skills and like learning from people that I consider to be wizards, people like Jamie Smart, who many people
Oh
listen
my
to his
God. Yeah.
podcast on, and just learning kind of many of the bells and whistles and and I know that there's like an infinite amount to learn there. I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. There's a way in which we're always just scratching the surface. But the thing that looks so true to me is that the feeling, like presencing the feeling and connecting and listening and being, that is it's basically all of it. Like in the sense that starting from there, little additional things can be added to it and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But if that isn't there, as far as I can see, transformation, lasting change, like it's just not going to happen. We know this in our
Yeah.
friendships. We know this when we talk to medical professionals. We know this when we talk any kind of intervention around therapy or counseling or anything. Ultimately, I think I once heard Michael Neal say, there's no client until there's a connection. Like you could be sat next to someone literally in the world of form and there's someone there in front of you and you're having a conversation and saying really cool shit and showing them all of your like certificates and how fucking good you are. But ultimately, if they think you're a if they think you're a twat, not that much is going to change. Like
No.
it's that feeling of connection, that
Yeah.
that deep connection to ourselves, that and the falling
Mhm.
away, falling out of the illusion of separation in that moment. That's what does all the work.
Mm.
So 100%. And it seems almost too simple, but for me, for everything I've invested, the thing that just comes through loud and clear for me is that less is more.
Yeah.
And I'm quite happy that I've spent a lot of money trying to get the more to realize that
Mhm.
actually it's all about the less. Like I'm fine with that because I think
Yeah.
you rarely meet people who've really got to grips with that. But it's everything. Like being able
Mhm.
to just be and listen is everything, right?
And I think the it's a personal journey, right? Like I don't think that I would be able to see this stuff had I not gone on the journey I've gone on personally,
Sure.
spiritually. And it's a weird parallel, and I'm trying to put it into words, which is kind of tough. But like when you when you have an insight, it's a knowing. It's like a knowing that something is some particular way. Quantifying that is difficult. But when I can sit with that, when I can sit with the energy of that or the feeling of that, that that creates, I think we always talk about it as like setting the stage for insight, or creating the scenario where insight can happen. Obviously, we can't make that happen with people. But it's this weird parallel that, like, the more that I go into this stuff and explore this stuff for myself, the more that I live into it and feel that it's true, the more of it I bring into my coaching, which makes a lot of sense. But the piece of it that is always fascinating to me is just that feeling, right? Like, we talk about it in our Present and Sober, our Get Stopped content. I think a couple of weeks ago when we ended, it was something, one of my clients loved it and sent me like a quote of, like, I said something like, "That's a lovely place to land." And you said something like, "What an incredible feeling."
Mm.
It's that. And it's funny because, like, I have done coach training too. I haven't done as much as you have, but, like, I've done plenty, and nothing is better than that feeling in terms of, like, having a conversation and being able to explore.
Yeah, Chip Chipman once said to me, "What a guy, what a name." I always say, I have to
Yeah.
say that. He said, and I know he said this to many people over the years, but to hear it live was kind of cool. He said, you know what Sid said? He said, "There's information in the feeling." Now, the thing is, that's not intellectual information, right? That is information that's coming from, well, it's spiritual information. It's coming through to let us know. And, like, for me, I just moved from a space of, I wonder if that's true, to holy fuck, that's true. And then I just started coaching from that, speaking
Mhm.
from that. But unless I'm in my head, fuck, we're all human beings, like, we get caught up. But coaching from that, speaking from that, creating podcasts from that, writing from that. And I just noticed the degree of impact
Mhm.
is just orders of magnitude beyond what it used to be. And I know there are certain places where I've worked across the years, and I'm surprised that I haven't been given the boot, because it's like, who's that fucking crazy dude talking a load of spiritual stuff? But the thing
Yeah.
is, people, they were, a lot of people were coming. They were big groups. Hang on, I know can you hear the doorbell ringing from the postman? Can you hear that in the
Yeah.
background? Oh, well, that's good news. That's good news. They were big groups, and people were saying things like, I was coming to your calls, and I got to be honest, I didn't know what on earth you were on about, but I was in a
Yeah.
really good feeling, and I just wanted to come back again and again. So I did. And then after 6 months or so, I suddenly understood what you were on about. It just
Mhm.
suddenly made sense. And I've heard a lot of people say this about listening to Sydney Banks, that when they first listen, it's like this fire hose of just kind of feeling or information or whatever it is, and they're like, what on earth is this guy on about? And then at some point, it all just, they start hearing something different, it starts making sense. And when he always used to
Yeah.
say, don't listen to my words, it's like the words are floating on a feeling. Well, I often say to people, look, your mind is going to try, even though I've told you this, just listen to the guy, fall asleep if that's what happens. Just listen, don't worry about trying to understand it, just keep listening and just see what happens. And I used to feel like that. I used to feel like, I don't know what he's on about, et cetera, et cetera. And then suddenly, all of a sudden, it was just one of my favorite things to do. And I still quite often will go for a
Me
walk
too.
or lie and listen to Sid. And I
Yeah.
said, just put that there for everybody, is just like, just what if, like, I don't know where you happen to be, but what if it's actually true, all
Mm.
this?
Yeah.
What if, and if you have, when you get to that point, if you get to that point where you go, oh shit, and then you start operating from that space, you might be surprised what you find.
Well, it's an interesting, you're talking about that coaching call, and I think it mirrors, like, it's certainly my personal journey for a long time. This is cliche as fuck, but I think it's cliche for a reason. And that, like, for a very long time, I was looking outside for different ways of understanding things, and different ways of, like, having a quote unquote good life or enjoying my life. And I had, that empiricist mindset actually reinforces this quite a bit, that, like, there are certain things that the way the world is, and we understand them via this method. And so it doesn't really say anything about happiness, right? It doesn't really say anything about contentment.
Yeah.
And so, I was then looking outside in material, things and all that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with any of it. But what started to change was, as my understanding evolved, I realized more and more it's an inside job, right? And more and more. And I think the same thing can happen with coaching. A lot of times, I mean, we see it all the time. Someone comes to me and says, my problem is drinking alcohol. And we very quickly find out as we start peeling the layers that it's more than that. And then we keep going deeper and, we see it even more. And being able to have conversations like this and talk about that feeling, like, to me, that's the place that growth comes from, that understanding comes from, that, like, when we get ourselves to this space where, my life isn't materially different than it was 5 years ago. Like, things are going on, right? My kids are getting older. I'm a little grayer, but like, my level of contentment is significantly higher. And I owe that to the understanding, or the evolving understanding of this stuff that we're talking about. And I owe that to sitting in that good feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a gift.
Yeah.
Well, man, what a beautiful feeling. But it's maybe I'd love to say to people, if you're digging these conversations, then ping me a message and let me know, because I mean, I love them, and I would love to do this more frequently, man. Like, we can
definitely.
do, and because it's I just love talking. I've always enjoyed creating stuff with you, man. Like, I love the fact that we get to talk as much as we do and create stuff together, both personally, professionally. It's awesome, man. So as always, thanks for coming on. Yeah, and I'll put links. I think a lot of people will know what we're up to in the world, but I'll put links to your website and to to the stuff that we're doing together and co-creating. And if we ever, at some point in the future, I'm sure we will end up either recreating something akin to the Forever Conversation, or creating something new, because we have so many interesting conversations about world affairs and all sorts of different things that I think could be a great thing to explore in the future. But man, anything else? Anything you want to say before we high five and go about our day?
Just thanks, as always. This was really great. It was a ton of fun. And I guess I could go on and on and on, but
we can. At the end will, right?
We will. Sorry, I'll stop myself. I was going to launch into a whole other conversation, which I know we don't have time for right now, but maybe that's good reason for another episode. But no, thanks, man. Like, this was awesome.
My pleasure, bro. Good to see you as always, man.